Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my channel, Traveling with Sam. I'm in the beautiful Castle District here in the capital of Hungary, Budapest. So we're just waiting to catch a bus, and if you like this video, please give it a like. And if you are ready, let's go explore. Wow, the view from my hotel room in the Hilton on the Buddhist side, the beautiful church here, and the Fisherman's Bastion in Budapest, Hungary. Here we are outside the Matthias Church, Gothic style. Matthias. Heading towards the Jewish quarter with my dad. We are going to start our tour soon, so to see the Empress Elizabeth of like the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and our guide with the yellow umbrella named Zoltan. So we're going to start our tour and explore and get some interesting information on this nice Thursday morning into the early afternoon.
If you remember, I just said, after the liberation, after the Habsburg liberated Hungary, the Jewish people had to leave the Castle district, and they moved a little bit upper on the Buda side. They settled down at the lands of the Zichi family, up here at the area of Old Buda. And after the Habsburg liberation, they just realized the Turks, they won't come back here any longer. The big fortifications, the massive city walls around the towns, they are not needed any longer. And did you know there was a city wall around the Castle Hill? And there was another city wall on the Fashion side as well. This smaller boulevard, the street, is indicating the former place of the city wall. If you're curious about, take a look back. Can you see this ugly wall piece over there? It has nothing to do with the original city wall, but it was standing exactly here at the same spot where we just had the first stop of the tour. And the city wall was demolished. Later, they started to enlarge the downtown of the Fashion side. They started to reorganize the city center. And they founded the main marketplace of the town at the beginning of the 18th century, just right there at the Elizabeth Square, the green spot with the Ferris wheel, you know, the park. Back then it was a large marketplace. It was the main marketplace of the city, located here on the west side. And I just said all the Jewish people who were mostly traders, they were living on the Buda side at the area of Old Buda up here. It caused a really huge problem, because every single day, just to sell the products at the market, they had to cross the river. And they couldn't stay here on this side. I said they could stay only at the land where the owner allowed that. So every single day crossing the river was expensive back then, because we had no bridges. They had to use boat bridges, ferries, but they had to pay the fees and tolls and everything. That's why the Jewish community started to look for a place closer to the market where they could stay. And finally, at the middle of the 18th century, they found the Hungarian Orci barons. They are a rich Hungarian noble family, and they had land right here at the present territory of the Jewish district. And that family constructed a large residential building right next to the smaller boulevard here in the 1750s. That building was standing exactly at the same spot where every building are standing in front of you right now. Started there at the corner, and the building lasted until the middle of the block. It was a really long one-story building here, and finally it was for the Jewish people as well to move into the building, to rent apartments inside. Of course, so many of them wanted to live close to the marketplace, and that's why they moved to the building. Roughly 75% of the tenants were Jewish at the building. That's why this building was well known as the Juden Hall. You will think it's a church because of the clock towers, or you will say it's a mosque because of this oriental style, but please be sure this building is a synagogue, because there is something suspicious at the top of the building. Up there behind the towers, you can find the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments. That's how you can recognize the building is a synagogue. Here in Hungary, most of the synagogues have the Ten Commandments at the top of the building as well, not just inside. And have you heard about that? This is the second largest synagogue of the world. And do you know where you can find the first one? Not in Israel, but in New York, in the United States, because in the US everything is bigger, you know? And yes, the Temple Emmanuel in the States, that's the largest in size. And this one is smaller, but this one has 3,000 seats, which means the Grand Synagogue of Budapest has more seats than the Temple Emmanuel in the US, probably because in the US the seats are bigger. Oh, I didn't say anything wrong, we need more personal space. Can you read the black blank? It says Theodor Herzl. Herzl Theodor was born here. Have you heard about this gentleman? Theodor Herzl? Who was he? He was the founder of Israel. He was the founder of the Zionism movement. And the founder of Israel, the dreamer, visioner of the Jewish state was born here. But before you ask, not inside the synagogue. No. This side of the building was attached only in the 1930s. And before, there was a normal residential building here at the same spot. So Theodor, the founder of the Zionism, was born at the building. Later, he had his bar mitzvah at the synagogue. And when he was 18 years old, he and his family, they moved to Vienna. Later, he became a journalist in Vienna. That's why the people think he was Austrian, but actually he was born here in Budapest. And now, let me continue the history part of the tour with the 20th century. We start the history part with this little golden age. I said after 1867, after Austria had the compromise with the Hungarians, everyone was happy. Let's say the Hungarians, obviously, they were happy with the compromise because they could have political representation. The Jewish people, they were also happy with the compromise because they could practice their religion totally freely. But here in Hungary, not everyone was 100% happy with this compromise because Austria had the compromise only with the Hungarians. And on the Hungarian part of the empire, only 54% of the population was Hungarian. We had so many minorities from the neighbor countries, clockwise from Slovakia, Ukraine, Romania, Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia. And those minorities, they had no equal rights because they had no political representation. Yes, after Austria had a compromise with the Hungarians, only Hungarian people could have political representation at the Hungarian parliament. And Queen Elizabeth, and she was the Empress of Austria. And at the end of the 19th century, Queen Elizabeth, the wife of Franz Joseph, supported the Hungarian independence movement as well. Thanks to her also, we could have the compromise with Austria, and that's why she was respected by the Hungarians. And you know, at the compromise, the Jewish people got equal rights as well. That's why she was respected by the Jewish community also. And that's why, just to honorate her, in 1882, the Jewish district officially adopted her name. So officially, I said this is the Elizabeth town, Erzsébet város in Hungarian, or if you're still interested in my horrible jokes, you can also call it the Sissy City. Anyway, up there, under the coat of arms, you can find the prominent, the names of the prominent streets of the Elizabeth town. Right now, we are at the Rumbach-Sebestyén Street with a golden background. Sebastian Rumbach, he was a famous Austrian doctor. He used to practice here in Budapest as well. That's why the street was named after him. And the synagogue was named after the street itself. So this is the Rumbach Street Synagogue in front of you. And how do we know this is a synagogue building? Up there, of course, you can find the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments. This building was constructed roughly 14 years after the Grand Synagogue. They finished this one in 1873, and it was the synagogue of the Central Group, the status quo ante group. And if you take a look at the facade of the building, you will guess it was built by the same architect. It looks similar. Both the buildings are sharing the same Oriental or Moroccan style, but no, it was not built by the same person. After the architect of the Grand Synagogue, Ludwig Förster, finished that masterpiece, he became popular and expensive. So the Central Group couldn't afford him. but they simply hired the student of Ludwig I. And the name of the student was Otto Wagner. Have you heard about Otto Wagner? Have you been in Vienna maybe? If yes, he has so many Art Nouveau buildings in Vienna. He was the founder of the Viennese Art Nouveau style, but when he constructed this building, he was only 26 years old. That's why he simply copied his master. He used the same colors, the same style. He placed the towers as well, but smaller ones. But he built a more traditional synagogue. So in liturgy, the central group was closer to the Orthodoxy, and that's why here they have the traditional shape. This building has an octagonal shape. If you take a look on the facade, you won't say that. But this is just a facade building in front of the synagogue. The synagogue itself starts 5 meters behind. And here the Torah reading table, the bima, was at the middle of the synagogue. Inside the building is richly decorated. The ceiling is full of flower ornaments and geometrical decoration as well. And this building has skylight windows. So back then during the services, on a sunny day, no artificial lighting was needed. But you should know the Central Group had the last service inside this building in 1959.
Passageway with so many different restaurants. This used to be the ghetto, so it's still lacking funds for renovations.
So, this is a famous ruin bar. This is the Simpla, and this is the first ruin bar in the district. If you haven't been in a ruin bar, the style explains everything. It was opened in a ruiny building, and you already know the story how the building became ruiny. During the communism, it was owned by the state, and the state was not a good owner. That's why it started to fall apart. So many times they moved the inhabitants out from the building. And at the change of the regime after 1989, the government had so many empty former residential buildings everywhere in the city, and they all wanted to privatize them. But the investors didn't come here to spend money, because back then the Jewish district had a really bad reputation. It was just a dark, risky part of the downtown. And roughly 20 years ago, they found a solution what to do with the buildings. They started to rent complete buildings out on a reasonable price. And Hungarian bar owners and party organizers, they found the potential at the former residential buildings, because every building has an inner courtyard, and the building around the courtyard works as an insulation. If they play music at the courtyard, you cannot hear anything next door or on the street either. So they are perfect party places. That's why they opened the bars inside, but they did everything on low cost, because they were just rentals. And that's why, because they didn't want to invest too much money into the places, they collected the second-hand furniture from everywhere, and they made decoration on the walls. And a little bit later, this low-cost, ruiny, let's say alternative style became popular and famous. And a couple of years after, the owners of the bar could earn enough money to buy the building from the government. So for that, it was a good investment.
Going on our next tour with learning about interesting stories, myths, and maybe some truth to it with vampires. Lovely view from our first stop, and we'll listen to a story by our tour guide, Fabian.
Awesome! And the cave system in the valley of the castle here. That is the labyrinth of Buddha, which is 5 levels deep at certain points, and it connects almost all the houses of the castle district beneath the surface. The labyrinth of Buddha has been a target of many legends and ghosts. One of my personal favorite stories comes from the late 19th century, when residents of the castle quarter often saw a black shadowy figure wandering the streets of the district alone in the middle of the night and disappearing in one of the many entrances of the labyrinth. He quickly became known as the Black Count, although many people identified him as the ghost of Dracula, who had spent here a good deal of his years as a prisoner. But there are many stories unrelated to Dracula which are just as popular. And now, allow me to tell you the most romantic but also tragic story of the Black Cow. Yes, pretty tragic, just to set the mood right at the beginning. Once upon a time lived a sad, lonely, and poor town in the castle border. A poor town? How is that possible? He was supposed to be rich. Well, unfortunately, his parents had lost everything earlier. Their money, their fortune, their name, their reputation, almost everything. Because when their one and only son grew up, he had almost nothing to his name other than a huge house with a huge cellar. But anyway, he was the poorest resident in the castle like that. But one day his fortune changed when he met a strange man who later turned out to be the leader of a band of robbers and thieves. They needed a shelter, and the young count desperately needed money. So they came to an agreement. The count offered his house's cellar for the criminals. And that was the most perfect shelter for them to hide. So they paid a lot of money for the count to rent his basement. You know, nothing has changed in Budapest since then. So thanks to their deal, the count quickly became one of the wealthiest residents in the castle quarter. His newfound fortune brought him an entry in high society once again. Finally, he was a rich count. That's why the count decided one day to organize a huge masquerade ball in the castle quarter, and it was going to be the greatest event of the year. Don't practice the correct English accent. But now, most of vampire stories can be traced back to superstitions founded in ancient cultures all across the world. Myth and legends tell us about the existence of vampiric creatures who resurrected from their graves just to torture the living. The ancient cultures spoke about such creatures which are not immediately similar to the vampires we know today, but they shared many core characteristics. First, we have Empusa from the Greek mythology. She was the daughter of Hecate, the goddess of witchery and darkness. Am I right, dear guests from Greece? Hecate and Empusa. I know I'm right, thank you so much. Well, and Empusa was set to lure young men in the middle of the night into the dark forest for some bow bow. And then she started to feast on her victim's blood before moving on the main course, their flesh. Another tale involves Lamia, who was a mistress of Zeus. But once Zeus's wife cursed Lamia, and then she was doomed to hunt children. Lamia even stole babies from their cribs and swallowed them. Paleodexy. Or bon appetit.
Going into the castle walls. Here are the Buddha castle.
Your evil laughter. Something like that? Oh, yeah. We can all laugh together. Don't be shy. Between his teeth, no more volunteers required. And then the insane commander danced around the campfire this way with the death corpses to demonstrate his laughter. not so many vampires and zombies and serial killers, but unfortunately a lot of evil creatures work here, cops and politicians. Square, this place used to be the execution site of regular people during the medieval ages, and nowadays, as you can see, it's a parking lot. Yay, much better. And you can also visit the house of Budini. They are open, but it's an opening times. House of Budini, yes, a museum dedicated to the most famous magician of the world, who was Hungarian, born in Budapest, not in this house. And unfortunately, he moved to the USA with his parents for a better and brighter future when he was only 4 years old. And later, during his career, he renounced his Hungarian nationality, but still, we are proud of him. Behind me, you can see this statue dedicated to the female soldiers of the Hungarian army. And I bet that this statue has 1,000 miraculous stories to tell, but it has nothing to do with my next pretty short story about holy Christian soldiers. In this quarter, you don't see any building built before 1686. How is it possible? Buda is almost 800 years old, but what about the houses? Every nightmare must come to an end, and the Turkish occupation era ended in 1686 when a united Christian army called the Holy League arrived to Buda and freed us from the Turkish occupation. Yay! Finally, victory! And the Turks could go home. Unfortunately, it turned out that those holy Christian mercenary soldiers from all over Europe were barbarians. Because after they defeated the Turks, the soldiers were allowed to rest and they were so busy that the entire town burned to the ground because no one cared about the fires after the battle. Buda burned down the ashes. And at the same time, the residents of the town were tortured and or imprisoned. The Jewish merchants and their families were deported and or killed, and the women were raped and or murdered. And it was only the appetizer for the holy soldiers. Because the most horrid thing they did was that when they captured a pregnant Jewish or Turkish woman, they cut their bellies, threw the infant out of it, placed a living cat inside, and then they sew it all. And if the women didn't die because of this torture, the soldiers, those terrible soldiers, threw them into the tank. We are standing at the church of Mátyás, the church named after the more popular Mátyás king, the first one, the just Matthias Corvinus, who managed to hunt down Dracula and imprison him into the labyrinth of Buda. But which Dracula? Now, again, I need 2 volunteers. A couple, or 2 friends who love and trust each other, or siblings who hate each other. But the time that all his actions were and contribute to the common welfare of Buda. One day, Dracula noticed that the poor, vagrants, beggars, and cripples had become very numerous in his land. Consequently, he issued an invitation to all those poor people in Wallachia Satan drank late into the night. After Vlad Dracula himself made a glorious appearance, he ordered his guards to block and board up every single door and window of that hole and set everybody and everything on fire. No one escaped the flames. More than 1,000 poor people died within just a blink of an eye.
Our first meal, Hungarian salad,
Take a picture.
beef goulash, main course, chicken paprika. Look at how elegant it looks. Dessert time. Going for an after dinner stroll. Very, very good restaurant. Highly recommend. Everyone enjoyed it. Now just strolling around.